Hey there everyone, welcome back to my build series on this LDO Voron 0.2 kit. We are nearing the end, I think, of the initial build at least. We've got some tuning and other things to do in the series going forward. But if you watched yesterday's episode, and if you watched the whole thing, thank you so much. It was really, really long. Looking back, I probably should have split it into 2 episodes, but what we did in that episode is we installed all of the software and firmware on this thing so that it was ready to go, and then we ran through the official Voron guide that goes through all of the kind of pre-print startup checks that we need to do to make sure that our motors are running in the correct direction and that all of our end stop sensors and everything are working so that we don't run into trouble when we try to print for the first time with this thing. And so all of those things checked out great, and this guy's ready to print. So I've loaded in some PLA because we don't have the enclosure done yet, so we can't really print with ABS or ASA, which are the filaments that I honestly have the most of here in the studio, but I did find an old spool of this plain white PLA. I've just loaded it into the top of the tool head, not through any official filament path yet. We'll do all of that in the future when we configure the filament sensor that's back in the foot. But so for now, we're just going straight into the top of the print head. That should work for a simple print for today. And so we're gonna get this thing printing, but before we do that, I need to add this into my slicer. So my favorite slicer currently, and I think probably for a long time because it's really good, is Orca Slicer. So I'm gonna show you how I would add a new printer into Orca Slicer and do some kind of initial config to get that set up, and then we'll send a file to the printer and print our very first file on this new printer. Let's do it. All right, so here we are. I've loaded up Orca Slicer, and because I use this with my other Voron printer, you see that it has already come up with a very large print bed. My other Voron is the big one, and so it's already loaded up in here. But what we're going to do is add a new second printer. And if you're running Orca Slicer for the first time, what we're about to do is part of the kind of configuration wizard that they send you through. But if you've already run Orca Slicer before and gone through that wizard and you need to add a new printer, the way to do that is to either pull down this little printer selection here and choose to select or remove system presets, or you can alternatively just click the little gear icon up here next to on the right hand side of this printer block. Either way, it takes you to the same place. This allows us to search for our manufacturer of our printer, and there are tons in here of presets. So no matter what printer you're using, even if it's not a Voron, there's a good chance I think you'll be able to find it in here with a preset. But I searched for Voron. You can see that the 2.4 350 millimeter one with the 0.4 millimeter nozzle is already selected. That's my other printer. If we scroll down here though, we should find a V0 somewhere. Yeah, so it's got a preset for 0.1. Ours, of course, is a 0.2, but the basic mechanics of the printer haven't changed. So this should be a fine preset to start with. And I'm going to choose the 0.4 millimeter nozzle version because that is what came with our kit, and that's what we've built for now. Again, since we're eventually tuning this printer up to print with as high of detail as we possibly can, eventually I'll be replacing that 0.4 with a smaller nozzle, and we may come back and reload the preset for that smaller size nozzle when we do that, or we might just edit the preset that we've already loaded. But in any case, for now, we're choosing 0.4, and I'll go ahead and hit confirm. And we'll see now, it's given us the smaller bed size here already in our little preview, and we can see that we've got the 2 system presets now for the 2 different size Vorons. So we could just print with these presets like this. There's a couple things I like to do though to configure it and give it its correct name as well. And so we'll go ahead and click this little edit button next to our preset here to edit the preset. Now there's a ton of settings you can change and play with in here. Most of these defaults are very good, and so I have no reason at this point to go in and change any of this stuff. If you want to play with maybe Z-hop or retraction, speeds and distances, you can do that here, and these changes will be global across all prints you do on that printer. If you want to play with the speed, you can do that here as well. Again, I like all the defaults, at least for now. To print with detail later on, we might actually be slowing down these speeds, we'll see. But for now, this is good. The one thing that I want to change in this dialog though is I want to just visually change the graphics that it uses for the print bed here. And so I'll just show you real quick over in the LDO GitHub repository where we've downloaded some of the custom STLs and firmware setup files and things like that. along as part of the process as we've been going along here. They also have these plate models for the slicer, and this is an entirely visual thing, so it's optional. You can do it or not, but there's a SVG texture file you can download and a STL model of the build plate. So these two files, if you download them, and I've already done that, you can go under the printable area here and hit this set button. Obviously, we don't want to change the size of the printable area. That's already set correctly, but we can load our custom texture. So we hit load, and I'll grab that texture that I downloaded, and then we'll hit load on the model, and we'll choose that build plate model that I downloaded. Now, if we hit OK and we close this out, you'll see it's just changed what this texture looks like that it's showing here for the build plate. So it's like the LDO plus Voron logo here. I like to do that just because it reminds me what the printer is. Again, just purely cosmetic and completely optional whether you want to do that or not. The second thing, though, is something I would definitely do, and that is to set up the connection to our physical printer so that we can show its web user interface from within Orca Slicer here. And so to do that, again, we go up next to our printer and we choose this little Wi-Fi icon, the connection icon, and that will bring up this other dialog. It's going to ask us to name our machine, and so as we've talked about in previous episodes, I've named this thing Voron Unit 3, and my big printer is Voron Unit 6. So we type that name there, and then we go in and we make sure that it's got Octoprint/Clipper selected for the host type because we've got Clipper running on this machine, and then it just wants us to type in our IP or host name. And again, in the previous episode where we set up the software, we named this thing Voron Unit 3.local on my network. And so if we do that, you can optionally click this test button. I'll just go ahead and do that. It doesn't take very long at all. It just makes sure that it can talk to the printer. It says that it connected to Octoprint. It's really Clipper. It's just a error here in the dialog in the text. So don't worry about that if you're concerned that it's saying Octoprint there. We're all good to go. If you happen to have set up some extra authentication to connect to your printer, you can put that key password stuff here. I haven't done that with my printer here, so we're just going to hit OK. And once we've done that, this device tab up here at the top of our window, we should be able to click on this, and then we'll see the web UI that we were accessing through our web browser in the episode yesterday, the previous episode. So this is nice because now we can do everything we need to do. If we need to like load or unload filament or whatever, we can do all of that from inside of Orca Slicer, and we don't have to worry about having a separate browser window open to be able to do stuff with our printer. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and load in a test model to try for our first print. And I could do like the Orca Slicer has a nice little cube. I'll show you actually. If we right click here, you can say add handy models. They have a cube, they have the benchy, right? So we could just choose the benchy and it'll put a benchy here on our build plate. If you want to do that, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to delete it. So there's lots of things you could print here. We could do a Voron cube. I wanted something a little bit more interesting, and so I downloaded an STL that I'm going to go and grab here. And I guess on brand with my channel here, right? It's a Gundam head. There's a couple things I want to do with this thing though before we print it. There's a couple things that I'm specifically testing with this model. One is I want to see what the first layer looks like, and I want it to cover as much of the bed as possible. So I'm going to actually scale this thing up. Let's try like 150%. I want it to fill most of the bed. Let's do 200. That's really close to the edges. All right, I'll split the difference. I'll do like 180. Yeah, that seems good. All right, so yeah, I care a lot about the first layer and seeing that it covers most of the bed and then it looks pretty consistent and good. And so this will be good for that. The other thing that I'm looking at with this model specifically is, let me go ahead and slice it and I'll show you what I have in mind here. If we look at how this thing prints, right, it's got this first couple of layers down here are just going to test our initial first layer on our printer and kind of those first couple after it. It's tall enough then that it's going to print some infill, and I've just gone with the defaults here, so it's just using a standard grid infill pattern. And then at some point it's going to have to bridge over that infill here to make this flat surface that we see now. So I'm curious to see how that works. That'll kind of give us an initial idea of how the cooling is on our print head. And then after that, it's printing all of these kind of detail lines on here. And so there's going to be a lot of Z-hop and stopping and starting the extruder and jumping around, and so we'll be able to see here whether we get very much stringing. Now again, I know and completely realize I'm printing with some filament that's been sitting out that's probably gathered in some humidity over time. So if we do see some stringing, it might be related to that. But that's the other thing I want to look for in this print, is just to see with this top kind of surface detail here whether we get very much stringing and how precise this detail looks. Again, remembering we haven't done any tuning of this printer or this filament yet, and so yeah, we'll keep all of our results here with a grain of salt. We'll just keep in mind that it's the very first print, but I think this will be interesting. The other thing is it's kind of tall enough. It's certainly not as tall as like a Voron cube would be or anything like that, but there are enough stacked layers from the side here. We should be able to kind of look from the side at the height of this model once it's done as well, just to see if we notice any sort of like extrusion problems or Z-banding or anything like that with inconsistencies of the layers being stacked there as well. And so those are all the things that I'm looking for. I just now noticed though that I sliced this with my atomic ABS filament selected, so I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to select something different. I'm gonna just select one of the Voron generic presets because again, we haven't dialed in any filament presets for this printer. Side note, if you're interested in how I go through the process of dialing in a filament and saving its preset here in Orca Slicer, leave a comment down in the bottom of the video here and let me know. I would certainly be willing to make an episode on that at some point in the future if that's something that people are interested in. So for now anyway, we'll go with Voron generic PLA. We'll slice this again, and that's looking good and ready to go. And so now, because we've already hooked up our physical connection, our Wi-Fi connection to our physical printer, we can just click the print button up here in the slicer and we can say upload and print, and this will actually upload the file to the printer and start it printing. And so if I jump over here to the device tab, we should see that yes, it's already turned on the heater and it's starting to heat up the print bed to be ready to go through its pre-print homing process and all of that stuff once it gets going. So I'm gonna shut up for a second and give you a view of the printer itself, and I'll probably time lapse this as we go through and watch it print. Alright, so the bed and nozzle have preheated. It's going through its homing process. Just for your information, that whole preheat process took, I guess it looks like about 4 to 5 minutes of real time here. So not too bad. Of course, we're only heating the bed to 60 degrees Celsius, so that's not that hot. So I wouldn't expect it to take very long, but yeah, 4 or 5 minutes, that's not so bad. It's printing a purge line across the front of the bed here to just get the filament started and primed. That is something that I added. It wasn't part of the default LDO config, so I added that yesterday after we were done with the initial setup stuff that we did. Alright, so here's the moment of truth. I can start to take a look at what this first layer looks like. I'm pretty happy with it. It is... yeah, it's looking quite good. Certainly not perfect, but again, we haven't done any tuning or really anything like that yet with this printer at all. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm a little concerned with my sort of makeshift spool holder situation that I've got going on the back of the printer there. You can see that the filament's kind of pulling pretty tight and that it's not wanting to really rotate that much. So I'm probably going to be reaching back here as we print and kind of manually unspooling more of the filament just to keep that tension off of the print head. But yeah, I'll do that throughout the print as needed to try to keep any tension off of this. I don't want this pulling back and affecting the print head, although it feels really solid anyway. I don't know that it's going to be moving much just from the pressure of being pulled back from that filament. But just in case, I'll do some manual unwinding of the filament as we go. Yeah, it's really good and smooth. Part of the reason that I chose to print with the white filament, well, the main reason was because that was the PLA I could find. But another nice thing about it is with the dark build plate here, it makes it real easy to see if there's gaps between the extrusions in that first layer. because if there were, I would see, you know, some black stripes basically down there in between the white filament lines. All right, second layer. I can tell that the part cooling fans have kicked in. They're actually pretty loud. But again, once we get this thing in an enclosure, that should be a lot better, I would imagine. It'll cut out a lot of that noise. And this is, again, the speed that it's running at is the default speed that we got from that Orca Slicer configuration that we loaded in. This layer looks like it's going down quite nicely as well. All right, yeah, I'm pleased with this. I am going to let this go. I'll probably time lapse the video again so that you guys can see it printing, and I will be from time to time reaching back here to unspool some filament so that we don't get filament caught partway through the print. And then when this thing is done, I'll pull the build plate off. We'll get a better, closer camera angle view of it here on my build desk, and we'll take a look at what the result looks like. So now we've started printing that detail on the top of the basic flat shape. Just as a note, the top surface of that flat shape looked really good before it started printing these detail lines. It was nice and smooth, so I'm pretty happy, I think, overall with that. Now you can see it's doing all of these little short extrusions and lots of Z-hops and those kinds of things. And so again, we'll see what both the level of detail and like the amount of stringing and stuff that we see once the print is finished with this part of it. But I think this is going to be kind of the pattern for the rest of this entire print, is it's just going to be doing these little short hops and little short extrusions as it fills in all of these little detail lines on the top of the print. Okay, so it's finished. Just for your information, that whole print took, it looks like about an hour and 15 minutes. And it seems like it went okay. I'm going to grab just this build plate and pull it off here. And we'll move this over to my build desk and get a good close-up camera view and take a look at how it turned out. Okay, so here we are. Tried to get a closer look, and actually let's zoom the camera in even more so you can get a close look at this. And it's not too bad, right? I've got definitely some stringing up around here and in between some of these details here. I'm probably overheating the nozzle. Again, we're using just the generic PLA profile for a Voron printer that came with Orca Slicer. But it looks like we've burned the filament. We've got a couple of kind of brownish spots in a few spots here. And that might be contributing to the stringing as well. In addition, again, this filament wasn't in the best condition. So we may be over extruding or maybe have a pressure advance issue up here on this flat surface. We've got, especially on the edges, just a little bit of over extrusion. I'm gonna go ahead and take this off the build plate and check out our first layer from the underside here. And this actually looks really, really good. It picked up the texture of the plate just about perfectly. So yeah, with this first layer, I'm super happy with how that turned out. And that was without a whole lot of adjustment to our Z offset, right? We just did the paper test basically when we were doing the initial calibration of the printer, and that's all that I've done so far. So that worked out really nicely. Yeah, we've got, it looks like maybe a bit of under extrusion here, but that just might be the STL I used. I didn't mention earlier, either this STL I got from printables.com, and I'll link to it down in the description below, so thanks to the author of this for providing it for us to be able to use. Yeah, overall I'm pretty happy with this print. I mean, given that it's the very first print on a new printer without any special calibration of the printer or the filament yet. This is pretty good. So what's next for us? Well, we need to finish building the printer. So I'm gonna stop with the kind of fine tuning and test printing for a little while here. At least the next one episode, might take 2 episodes. We'll go ahead and finish up with the going through the LDO manual and the Voron build manual to build the enclosure and put the skirts on the printer. Basically just close everything up and kind of finalize it all. And so we'll do that in the next 1 or 2 episodes here of the series. And then after that, we'll go back into working on dialing in settings and getting this thing to print at the level of quality that I'm after. Probably the first mod or change that, it's not really a mod, but the change that we'll do probably first is swapping out that nozzle with the finest Voron Revo nozzle that they make, which I believe is 0.25 millimeters. And then we'll adjust our print profile to try to print at better detail, and we'll go from there. So yeah, just looking at this again, I'm pretty happy with this overall. We didn't look closely at the stacking of the layers on the Z-axis, but that looks to me to be quite good as well. So yeah, I'm happy. This is good. All right, that's going to do it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.